Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan, no Luris for you, Sachs. Ethan, I saw the most adorable clip on Twitch TV the other day.
So when I get to stream now, it's usually during Jonah's nap, and if he doesn't always time waking up with the end of a match or the end of a draft, so I'll sometimes go get him and have him sit with me for the tail end of the stream. And I was drafting Vintage Cube. I got to pack 3. He woke up. I went and got him. And then, like a champ, pack 3, pick 2, I got past Ancestral Recall. So
nice.
He already did his job. And then at about, I was drafting like a black-green Recurring Nightmare Survival of the Fittest deck. And
is that deck back, by the way? Is it good? Black-green is draftable?
It was great. I got to tell you, this new, whatever they're doing with Vintage Cube, I want them to keep doing it. Because, like, Jund and Mardu garbage is, like, very good currently. And, like, Luris is one of the best things you can do, I feel like. Anyway, so I did trophy with the deck, but I got to, like, I don't know, pick 4 or something in that pack. And there was a Luris. And I was like, am I allowed to take Luris here? And Jonah, perfect comedic timing, just goes, no.
It took you a second to realize, too, in the clip. Like, you just heard to talk to him, and then you busted out laughing when you realized he'd answered your question. It was great.
I mean, I don't think, obviously, he didn't understand what I was saying, and he doesn't have the word yes yet. Everything is no. You ask him any question that he would actually say the answer yes to, he'll just say, no. But it was very funny. So, yeah, if you want to see that, I think it's already been shared in the Lords Limited Discord and the MTG Parents channel. But yeah, it was very adorable. I am loving my love for Vintage Cube is back. It was gone for a long time, and it is definitely back. I feel like is it Vintage Cube or is it Modern Horizons Cube? That's the question. Because I just feel like I don't pass cards from any of the Modern Horizon sets, basically.
They're very powerful. Psychic Frog is the complete nuts in the Vintage Cube right now.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I feel like White is so good now, is there's like everything from the last set, like Pride, Guide of Souls, yes. Johnny, like all of these nutso cheap White cards. That was the thing, like I faced a deck like this, and I felt this when I watched you draft of one of the feeder league last week, and you ended up in like a blue-white control deck. And I'm wondering if that deck isn't good anymore because everything that's good is 1 or 2 mana. So like all the tempo you leverage from like, remand your thing, memory lapse your thing doesn't work because your opponent's like, yeah, I'll just double spell or triple spell this turn,
I mean, my results definitely speak to it not working, but I don't know if that's a knock against the deck. But I will say, speaking of Vintage Cube, I was listening to this week's LR episode, which was their Q&A session for Bloomburrow, and someone asked about the LR v LOL showdowns, and they called us some cowards, said we would never 3v3 Vintage Cube with them. Cowards was the word that they used. And I will have LSV know that I have watched every LSV Cube video for the last 3 months, and I am prepped and ready to cut him as hard as possible on his favorite archetypes.
So I will return in kind, and I will say they're so scared of playing us in a normal set that like they have to have the home field advantage. The only way they want to play us now is in Vintage Cube, where they know they have an edge. That's pretty cowardly, I'll say.
But listen, I'm ready to throw down in Vintage Cube. If LSV wants to go, I feel confident in my Vintage Cube skills. I am not as good as LSV. I'm definitely not as good as BK. But I think I could like hang with Marshall. I think I'm at Marshall's level in Vintage Cube.
Yeah, look, bring it on. Whatever. I got nothing to lose. I'll take them on. It's fine. The gauntlet's back on, baby. Shall we get into, speaking of standard sets, so we get into sending off, I think, one of your favorite limited formats in recent memory, Bloomburrow.
Please. So I got home from a football game last night at 11 p.m. It was hot. It was like 100 degrees in Indiana yesterday. Hottest football game ever. Just stood and sweated in no moving air. Got home and showered, took a cold shower, and sat down in my armchair, and I was like, I want to draft. And I opened it up, and I saw Bloomburrow, and I was like, huh. And then I opened up the limited thing to see what the other premier draft format was, and it was Dominaria. And I was like, guess I'm doing a Dominaria draft. And I did a Dominaria draft. That's how little I like Bloomburrow.
Did it make you appreciate Bloomburrow at all? Because I feel like I think Dominaria United, or sorry, OG Dominaria is one of the like poster childs for let's never do a flashback set ever again.
No, I had a good time. I opened Mirari Conjecture and I drafted a Mirari Conjecture Loops deck, so I was quite entertained.
Okay, nice. On your phone, no less.
On my phone, it was very stressful.
Yeah, that does seem stressful. A lot of clicking there. A lot of clicking. Yeah, Beers came into my chat yesterday when I was streaming. He was like, were we all just like sick, or were we just like hoodwinked into thinking that Dominaria was a good set at the time? Like, what happened? I know you called it.
Dominaria sucked.
I know you said it. You called it from jump, and I was like, no, it's great. We can cast divination and splash bombs or whatever. Skittering Surveyor, pack one, pick one. Anyway, we're off the rails, and you can probably tell we like being off the rails because we'd rather do that than talk about Bloomburrow, which I think is a fine set, but definitely I think one of the more lackluster sets in recent memory for the community at large, and I think for us specifically as well. Ben, I have some exciting news. We're recording Saturday morning on the weekend of the Arena Open. You've set a very responsible limit for yourself. You're telling me you're not going to stay up until 5 a.m. trying to queue for the Arena Open?
I am not. It's Labor Day weekend. I am giving myself 2 bullets on the sealed, and I am spending the rest of the day with my girlfriend. So come what may, if that means I'm playing on Sunday, great. If that means I'm not playing on Sunday, I'm fine going out with 2 more sealed entries and possibly a draft of Bloomburrow.
Best of 1 or best of 3?
I have not given it any thought. Probably best of 1 if that's where the stakes are the highest.
Okay.
The chances are the best to queue.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, yeah, so we're going to send off Bloomburrow in classic Lords of Limited fashion here with 50 takes in 50 minutes. It's a great way for us to summarize the set and a great place for people to return to if they haven't drafted the set before and it's coming back in a flashback event or whatever, coming up at your LGS, that sort of thing. So we love to do these episodes. It's a really fun, succinct way to wrap up a format in a neat little bow. So let's do a little housekeeping and we'll dive in. First things first, the Patreon page, patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. Show will always be free, but we have some awesome perks over at the Patreon page. Right now, the base level, what everybody gets access to is the Lords of Limited Discord. And, we're saying it as we lead up to Duskmorn coming in around the corner. Next week, we'll be talking about previews. The week after will be the Crash Course, where we may or may not implement a radical A through Z 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 star asterisk plus minus new grading system. Who knows? Ben, did you really appreciate having your off the cuff idea last week just get like
thoroughly dissected and analyzed
under a microscope?
I think people thought that we had planned that out, and it literally was just, well, what if we did this?
Yeah,
just live discussion.
I think in your defense, or in defense of the people who wanted to put it under the microscope, I think my enthusiasm for it probably gave people a bit of a oh, I guess they thought about this. I guess they've given this some time. But I was like, oh, this sounds great. Let's do that. And I still kind of feel that way. So we'll see what we do for the Crash Course. But anyway, back to the Patreon and the Discord. The Discord is a great place for new set. You get to talk about the new previews as they roll in, just share in that hype with new cards. And then once the full set gets spoiled, everybody's trying to figure out their tier list, their top commons or uncommons, whatever, talking about some secret cards, some bombs, some overplayers, all that stuff is great. Practice drafts with like-minded limited individuals, and then when the new set drops, you break the format wide open. It's a great community of folks out there, and some great perks as you move up the reward tier rankings, and we'll be talking about some changes to those in the coming weeks as well. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. So this week we're welcoming Aaron and Leon. Thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough.
Any big picture thoughts you want to get out of the way before we dive into the 50 takes here?
Bloomburrow was a 0 on the new Lords of Limited
wow.
Skill.
Wow.
Belongs in no archetypes. Belongs in no one's draft repertoire.
All right, sir.
That's too hard. That's too harsh. It was below average for me. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, I just still feel like I think
we shouldn't do that now. We should do that at the end. Sorry.
That's fine.
What was your question? Any big picture
thoughts? Picture thoughts before we get into the takes?
No, I don't think so. I think let's let the takes do the talking for us.
Sounds good. All right, we'll get 50 minutes on the clock, and why don't you kick us off here with point number 1?
Number 1, Bloomburrow is best summarized as a core set with synergy.
But we don't get core sets anymore. So you're showing your boomer socks right now. What does that mean? What does a core set with synergy mean?
Excuse me, sir. Foundations is coming out in 3 months.
But we don't know what that's going to be.
It's going to be a core set.
Okay.
But I think core set is like for an introductory level set to try to onboard new players easier, that sort of thing. I think we saw that in some of the cards. There definitely felt like there was a concerted effort to put less text on cards to me in this format, that sort of thing. And the synergy was very clear. Like it was, as a new person, if you're sitting down to play Magic and you want to draft red black and you take the cards that say lizards, like you're going to end up with a good deck, and the cards that do lizards things are going to do lizard things well together.
Yeah. And I think that the synergy part of it did, not that it was like super difficult to figure out, but that the synergy aspect of the format gave you, the tools for, it was an interesting puzzle to try and solve of, okay, what A plus B thing am I trying to get? What slots in here? And then I think maybe pulling back from that a little bit and realizing that, yeah, synergy was good. I think like raw card quality trumped synergy in this format for me.
I think that's generally true, yes, except to me, the synergy almost exacerbated things I didn't like about the set, where like with cross-pod play, and maybe this is just a arena and a thing, but when you drafted your seat and you scrapped it out and you ended up with a good deck and you valued your good cards and, you had your Hunter's Talent and you still managed to play green to play your Hunter's Talent, and then you play against someone who just got every black-white bats card or something,
Yeah.
and all the rares, it just, the synergy juiced up good draft slots artificially because it was so present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just depending on how the packs broke, if like you're the only bats drafter and like Azora line gets opened and whatever else, like that's gonna make its way to you because you're the only black-white bats drafter, and then your deck is gonna be juiced. Number 2, Bloomburrow was a 2-color pair format. It did almost feel like a guild set, but usually the guild sets are half the color pairs, they're 5 color pairs, and this felt like all 10 were viable. I mean, certainly we saw a not resurgence, an insurgence of blue-red over the past week or so, right? Just really sort of taking, certainly from D4, taking the top spot on the Mythic rank ladder, but some other content out there as well, shouting out how to draft blue-red. And I do think everything was viable to an extent. Not all created equal, but everything viable for sure.
Yes, I would stand by that. But I think clear delineations, like probably the top 3 archetypes, gap, next 4 archetypes,
right,
gap, last 3 archetypes, something like that. But certainly everything viable. And, guild format usually comes with a bit of a negative connotation. And certainly for me, I have not enjoyed those sets as much as, where all 10 decks are viable. And I certainly appreciated that about Bloomburrow here.
Yeah, for sure. I think this set would have felt much less enjoyable, and your mileage may variable on how enjoyable it was, period, but much less enjoyable if half the decks were present.
Number 3, each color pair in Bloomburrow was straightforward and synergistic without much crossover synergy between archetypes. It really kind of felt like once you found your lane, however many picks that was in, whether it was 3 or 5 or 7, there was no deviating, and you generally knew which card you were picking out of the pack, every pack.
Yeah, and you really I think usually I like to try and lock in, I think about when you lock in your second color is usually early pack 2, like somewhere between pack 2 pick 2 to pack 2 pick 4 is generally when that happens. And I do think it was a little earlier, and I do think it was a little earlier in this format because there were so many secret gold cards as well. And I would say only one, maybe 2, maybe both green and black, you could just get deep in that color and then figure out what was going on with your second color in pack 2. But more often than not, you at least had a slant. Like it was hard, like maybe you just had a couple savers, a couple nocturnal hungers, whatever, a Wix patrol, and you're like, I can literally do any black deck. But usually you had at least you're like, well, I have a persistent Marsh Stalker, which I will play in any black deck, but it's going to be at its best in blue-black rats. And so that's going to, nudge me towards there a little bit.
Yeah, you definitely, I think, got steered into archetypes artificially early by the way the cards were designed in the format.
Number 4, green was the best color because it had self-contained synergy and power in green across all the green archetypes. It just did everything, this is a real deep cut. Have you played the original Ninja Turtles game on Nintendo, like the OG, like 2D side scroller
Yes.
game,
Yes.
Donatello is like the best turtle, bar none. Like his weapon ranges the farthest, it does the most damage. And that's what green felt like. It was just like, wait, why does it do all the things? Why does it have the most inherent synergy and the best rate? Plus, it gets great removal. Like it just did all the things.
Yes, for sure. Donatello, best Ninja Turtle, not close to close. I had a sick Donatello Ninja Turtle costume one year for Halloween when I was a kid.
What made it so sick?
It was hand sewn. My mom like handmade like this Donatello costume. It was awesome. Yeah, I loved Ninja Turtles when I was a kid.
That's pretty cool.
As far as green in Bloomburrow, I think there was some discussion too about, well, like, yes, green was the best color, like in the data world, and then like, does that hold true across the format? You know, as people start to draft green, or then does something else become the best color? That sort of thing. I mean, yes and no. Like you can look at it. It's like our fluctuation of how we use the grading scale, right? Sometimes it's on raw power, sometimes it's on when you want to pick it, which was what led to those great discussions last episode. I think as a static thing, green is unarguably the most powerful color. Like it contains the best cards, the most powerful cards, the deepest amount of commons, that sort of stuff. Now, whether you want to argue that something else becomes better than green later in the format as green gets more contested, certainly I would buy that, but not intrinsically the best. It's the best because green is contested. I do think green is pretty uncontestedly has the most juice to squeeze in the format.
Agreed.
Number 5, forage was the most powerful mechanic in the format, which bolstered green in power and synergy. Best cards, best mechanic too.
Yeah, true. It's so interesting. Like I definitely felt like forage was a bit of a question mark going into the set. Like how likely will you be able to have 3 things getting in the bin that you actually want to take out? I was worried about the tension between forage and threshold, but like what was really great about it, I mean, obviously you got to exile 3 cards from your graveyard just fine, but the food tokens running around and the things that were food like carrot cake and harvest or heaped harvest, those really gave you the juice for those cards because you didn't have to worry about using your graveyard as a resource.
Well, and I think the reason we were questioning it in the beginning was this format looked a lot like LCI to me during preview season. And LCI, the black-green stuff fell totally flat. Like I was expecting, based on what I saw in preview season, for this to be LCI 2.0, and it was nothing further from the truth than that. It kind of flipped that on its head, and the Jeskai stuff was a little bit weaker, and the black-green was where it was at.
Yeah, for sure. Number 6, Offspring played out well as a kicker-esque mechanic, but it didn't fundamentally change the format. It mattered most in green-white, most with Intrepid Rabbit. Like, is that? I think that's the only 1 mana cost Offspring cost, right, to get your extra 1/1. Everything else is 2, sometimes 3. But it didn't really change anything about cards, like how you evaluated things, right? Like you were usually, except for the rabbit, like you were usually just probably casting it on rate. You know, you're casting the Rush Shield Rampager on 4. You're not waiting to get the little. It was just a nice bonus of like, oh, did you top deck this when you have 6 mana? Cool.
Yes, that was how it largely felt. And then green-white did want to go wide, and it looked like it was going to matter in red-white, but that just didn't quite pan out to be a good archetype.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's just sort of going back to green being so good. 1/1 tokens of things weren't so good because they couldn't tussle in that way. And so you needed them to have an extra bit of oomph from their activated abilities or whatever.
Number 7, Gift. Largely irrelevant as a mechanic.
Is that true?
I think so.
Yeah.
What it was so, everyone was like, well, it adds layers, it adds decisions. Like, kind of, but you generally hoped to not have to gift. And like when you had to gift, you did it begrudgingly. Like me at Christmas.
Here's a question for you. Did you ever feel like, I feel like the most surprising gifts I received in the format were from Longstock Brawl. I feel like my opponents gave me fish in spots where I was like, why am I getting a fish here? You were winning this combat here. But then but it wasn't like every time that didn't pan out. I feel like it was often like, oh yeah, my 1/1 fish doesn't really matter here, and the extra counter on your creature really matters. I feel like late in the format, I started to realize like, I think even when you win the fight, maybe gifting a fish here is correct more often than not.
Yeah, I like Longstock Brawl. I think that card is great. But ultimately, gift could have not existed and the format would have been largely the same, I think.
I think that's true. It didn't really change. Like
there was no build arounds. There was no. It didn't cause any new archetypes.
Excuse you, Jolly Gerbils asks your forgiveness for that comment.
I didn't get that deep in the weeds. I'm sorry.
The one card that comes to mind is Cruel Claw's Heist. That's the black rare that you can, like, it's Thoughtseize, or if you gift a card, then you get to, that card you Thougeize, you get to exile, and then you can cast.
But you're just always gifted.
You're always gifting, but that's like the one card.
That's what I mean. Like, there was no decision making, you know?
That's the one card where I feel like the gifting, like, actually changed the way you looked at the card, whereas everything else just felt like I'm weighing what I'm like the bonus I'm getting versus the bonus I'm giving you, you know?
Yes, sure, but they also could have just designed that card without gift to do what it always did.
Yeah, you could just been like, your opponent draws a card and then you
Thoughtseize them and get to play the card.
Okay, fine. It didn't matter. Number 8, Valiant. Man, what a big miss for us. Valiant fell flat as a mechanic. And this again goes back to green's creatures, large, red-white's creatures, small. The whole thing was target them so they can get big, which sometimes worked. I'm not saying it's a bad deck or whatever, but like, just if you had your choice of what do you want to start with, do you want to start with things that grow to the size of green's creatures or are the size of green's creatures, you would choose the latter.
Yeah, I think red-white really wanted Mabels and things like that. Not necessarily that it needed Mabel every time, but Blacksmith Talent or stuff. It needed higher rarity cards. It certainly was not there at common.
Well, and it also needed, like, not all of the Valiant triggers grew. Like, sure, was it Heartfire Hero, the 1-drop uncommon? Like, that was one of the best, but a lot of them, like, did other things where I was like, no, I would actually just like you to be large. I don't need you, like Mousetrapper. I was like, yeah, tapping a thing down is nice. It would be nice if you turned into a 4/4 instead of a 3/2, you know?
Yeah, Mousetrapper, big miss for me. Number 9, Expend was a simple mechanic done well. It didn't really change the format or how you drafted, but it was just a nice bonus on cards.
It did change some sequencing sometimes, I think. I think it definitely, like, there was a little bit of a puzzle there with your hand of like, okay, I play my Roughshod Duo here, or do I wait so that I can do like Duo plus a 2-drop to get the Duo trigger for trample? Like, it added a little bit, but I agree. Largely just felt like a little icing on the cake.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you that it did do some things, but like if that's what we're reaching for here, for like Bloomburrow being a masterpiece of a set, like I think we're reaching a little bit. Like Expend's about as face up as a mechanic could be.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's hard for those of us to add to 4. I don't know what to tell you, Ben. Number 10, Threshold. Played out best as an aggro tempo deck, and like it's so funny. I feel like all of the cards were telling us to do that, and I personally felt resistant to that early. I was like, well, but Threshold, that's a control mechanic, game goes long. And I was like, no, that's not what you're trying to do. You are trying to beat down and just like end the game, and Threshold will help you push that over the top. But like, yeah, Persistent Marstalker was just like the more so, I feel like, than the mentor, like the sort of signposty, this is what the deck is trying to do. Rats, aggro, and then Threshold pushes it over the top because you get this, you know, aggressive beater back in play attacking immediately.
Right. You actually get the graveyard filled by forcing your opponent to trade in combat, plus then maybe like one other card that dumps some things in there, and then boom, you have Threshold.
But like you and I really, like, even to this day, when I see, I think it's called Mind Whisker, that's the 3/2 that surveils 1, and Threshold, your opponent's creatures get -1/-0. To this day, I see that in a pack, and I'm like, ooh, that looks good.
Me too.
It's not good. That's not what the deck is trying to do. It's so weird.
Me too. Number 11. The talents were a huge win on the mechanics list. Huge.
And this is like probably the thing. If we're reaching, right, as you see, you were calling me out for reaching with Expend. If we're reaching for what gems the format had to offer, I think the talents were what the format had to offer in terms of like a late stage or builder rounds, whatever. I mean, we'll have plenty to talk about with builder's talent, but like almost all the talents overperformed to vastly overperformed my expectations.
Yeah, I think huge win for the format. If somebody says Bloomburrow, I think the thing I will remember about Bloomburrow is the talents. That's the thing that will stick out to me.
Yeah. But unfortunately, number 12, Innkeeper's talent and Hunter's talent were broken. I think a little too broken for limited. Innkeeper's talent, like, I mean, it's really hard to beat, but at least it's a rare. Hunter's talent is also really hard to beat and is an uncommon.
They're closer in power level than you would think when you read the cards, which is kind of wild.
Right. Yeah. That is pretty wild. And one you're going to see a lot more than the other.
Number 13, the official Lords of Limited color power rankings. In first, green.
In second, black.
Third place, white.
Fourth place, upset, blue.
You'll love to see it. Blue making some strides, end of the format. And in fifth, bringing up the rear, red.
Yeah. But like, I mean, as we'll get to when we get to color pairs, like they're all mostly, like they're not definitely created equal, but they're all playable for sure. I think for me, it's green, gap, black, white, gap, blue, red.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Number 14, blue was underdrafted near the end of the format. And I think that will probably, like, if you're coming back to this, if you're like, I never played Bloomburrow and it's being flashed back on Arena during a downtime, I'm going to listen to 50 takes. I'm going to guess blue is going to be underdrafted again, because
not just underdrafted, like criminally underdrafted.
Oh yeah. You just get you get past whatever. Oh God. What's
like 6 picks Mockingbirds, that sort of thing. Just crazily late rares.
Dowerport Mage, etc. And then like, yes, its commons leave a little bit to be desired, and we'll shout it out later. Lightshell Duo, just as like a late, I just get this card in all your blue decks is awesome. But it's uncommons, like when you figured out what you were trying to do and blue being open, it's uncommons delivered.
Yes, I agree.
And I think blue-black probably a late stage sleeper favorite of both of ours. I mean, blue-green I think was obviously good from jump, but blue-black I think I really, really enjoyed that deck as well.
Number 15, speaking of decks, the official Lords of Limited archetype power rankings. Top in the heap, king of the hill, the pile of nuts, green-black squirrels.
Number 2, green-white rabbits.
Number 3, blue-green frogs.
Number 4, red-black lizards.
Not a clean sweep for green. We were close.
Yeah.
Number 5, blue-black rats.
Number 6, black-white bats. So low.
We had a little pre-show jousting over black-white bats.
That's all right.
I think red-black and blue-black are better than it. You would probably have it in fourth, yeah?
I would probably have it in fourth, but that's just like, I still, despite my efforts, I think I disrespected red-black lizards up until the end of the format, and that's on me. But I am what I am.
Number 7, red-green raccoons.
Number 8, red-white mice.
Number 9, blue-red otters.
And number 10, I hardly knew ye, except for the one time I had you in sealed, blue-white birds. Did you ever draft blue-white birds?
I never drafted it, but I loved my blue-white bird sealed pool that I opened. It was so much fun to play.
Plume Creed Mentor just looked like a house, and I never knew when to pick it.
It's because it still was smaller than all of Green's cards that had reach. Like every one of Green's cards had reach too.
That's true. You're playing a 2/3 flyer, and Green's like, whatever. I have a sticky tongue sentinel. Who cares?
But the thing about red black lizards, to go back to the red black versus black white discussion, red black was just so consistently good at forcing the opponent into playing the type of game it wanted to play. Like it just. Whether I was piloting red-black or playing against it, red-black was so good at getting on the front foot and just forcing your opponent into making bad decisions, and could hang because of that as the game went long. Like lots of times, like I thought I stabilized, and like on turn 12, they still figure out some way to get me enough on the back foot to make bad decisions and then leverage that into another attack the next turn.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I just remember... Not even playing it myself, but facing black-white bats as some kind of aggressive deck.
And just feeling like you never
And
win.
you're just like, oh, I can never. You started the game at 28 life. I can never win.
Yeah.
And I never felt that. But you're describing a similar hopelessness in facing red-black lizards. It's just not perhaps as dominant. Number 16, finding the open lane was important because many of the premium rares and even uncommons excelled in one deck. Like I just said, depending on how the packs broke, if you found yourself in that right lane and those cards were opened, they're going to make their way to you and your deck is going to be juiced.
Yeah, and I still think it's probably right to start towards green or to slant towards green, one of those top 3 green archetypes. But, I mean, if it's clearly open, you're definitely supposed to draft one of the other decks for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Number 17, Bloomburrow rewarded getting on board early to snowball with synergy and aggression.
Yeah, well, and also getting on board, a lot of getting on board early was, we'll talk about this in a second, but was also sculpting your hand a little bit, right? So there was getting on board to begin the synergy game. There was getting on board early just to, press your advantage or pressure your opponent. And there was also getting on board to start to like sculpt your hand a little bit. So to plan out your future turns. You needed to be doing one of those 3 things.
Yes, you had to be spending your mana in the early turns. Like, it was closer to you really wanted to be playing a 2-drop than not. It felt very dangerous to keep a hand on the draw where your first play was a 3-drop.
But did you feel like this format was aggressive? Because I don't. I know it's like, I'm sure, I actually don't know, but I think I saw some early scuttle that it's like one of the faster sets or whatever by the metrics that are used in terms of measuring game length. But I felt like my games were grindy a lot of the time.
I agree. That's one of the things that I think maybe this is a feature of the format, not a bug, but that I viewed as a bug, was that like the format just asked for you to account for so many different types of games without providing you very dynamic cards to try to do that with. Like some of the games, like you went 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and your opponent had conceded by turn 6. And then the games where you and your opponent both go 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, then like the game goes 14 turns and whoever floods out loses, or whoever casts the one mind spiral in their deck that they drew at the right time wins. Like the format just asked your decks to try to do so many different things, especially if you wanted to play a reactive game plan.
That is a fair assessment and succinctly put, if I may say, sir.
Thank you.
Number 18, the prevalence of food in the top archetypes made the format hostile to aggro without the ability to compete in the late game. I felt this for sure. This is one of the reasons I don't feel like the format was aggressive, was like black-white life gain was a good deck and food was running rampant.
Yeah, black-green squirrels could certainly go to the late game. Black-green squirrels just crushed aggro decks.
Yeah.
And green-white also had food running around everywhere. Blue-green got access to food. Like those top archetypes were all food archetypes, which is probably also why, in addition to small sizing, that stuff like red-white struggled a bit. I do think red-black was an exception to that. I think Fireglass Mentor as the uncommon gave enough card advantage and was able to be triggered enough that it could really compete in the late game.
Well, yeah, and that deck had, my love for Kindle Spark Duo aside, but that deck had ways to nug your opponent to trigger that without tussling in combat. So it could sort of like transform into, it's a beatdown aggro deck or whatever, but it could transform into a grindier attrition war advantage engine, and Fireglass Mentor was a big part of that.
Yes. I think if I had to pick a speed for the format, I would say medium to slow, honestly, if both players got on board.
Yeah, that's my feeling too, but I feel like that's not a popular opinion.
I agree. Number 19, card draw and filtering were important in games where both players got on board early.
I mean, so many things here, right? Like you were fighting Mana Flood and Mana Screw, both, right? You had to sort of toe the line there.
You were prone to that if you didn't make an effort to not be.
Well, and cards like Top Performers, Carrot Cake, Cash Grab, Shoreline Looter, etc., those cheap ways to sculpt your hand in some way were really important. Pond Prophet, just as a little, hey, here's my Elvish Visionary, cantrip, draw a card that's going to like hopefully, pay some synergy dividends down the road. Those were the things you needed.
Yes, and I think a well-timed Stargaze or a Dire Spite or Mind Spiral, all of those cards, it was such a weird tension because you wanted them, but you didn't want too many of them, because if you had too many of them, you just got steamrolled. But you really wanted to draw them when you wanted to draw them. They were like your best draws in the deck. So it was awkward. You kind of had to include them as like a one of and hope that they showed up at the right time. I think I went overboard on this aspect of the format, and I think I played too many Stargazes and Dire Sights.
Sealed did you dirty a little bit, I think. Number 20, French vanilla cards were back in Bloomburrow. And I don't even know if these are like French vanilla soy latte. Like these have so many words.
Cherry.
Right. Like
caramel syrup.
We got Brightblade Stoat. Brightblade Stoat is pretty tame, right? First strike, lifelink. Okay, we just have 2.
Galewind Moose, then we've got Flash, Reach, Trample, Vigilance. Just ridiculous.
That card is nuts. Strike Force, that's what? Vigilance, double strike, flying. You don't even have the Charging Monstrosaur on here, which I'm forgetting the name of, but the 5 mana, 5,
the boar.
Trample, Haste, and Secret Reach. Definitely got by that a little bit. But it's so weird to put Reach on that card because, like, it's never untapped.
For sure. Number 21. Bloomburrow was full of secret gold cards that usually corresponded with their creature type.
Starlit Soothsayer was only playable in bats, right? Like that's the 3 mana 2/2 flyer. If you've gained or lost life at the end of your turn, you surveil 1.
And then something like Sonar Strike, on the other hand, was like certainly at its best in bats. That's the 2 mana, deal 4 damage, and if you control a bat, you gain 3 life, and you can do it to an attacking or blocking or tapped creature. That was just a pretty good white removal spell, but really premium in black-white bats.
Right. Well, a good white removal spell if you weren't being super aggressive, which was like often black-white, like black-white in the sense of like you were kind of ships in the night, like you were flying over, and then if your opponent's trying to crack back with their 4/4 on the ground, Sonar Strike really got them done. Number 22, the cycle of duos were not all created equal, and I wonder if it would have been better for us to put these into clumps rather than a full ranked list, but I agree with the rankings here. Number 1, love this little guy, Baker's Bane Duo.
And number 2, also green. Like the green duos, 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tree Guard Duo.
So good. Number 3, Dagger Fang Duo. This card was great. The 3/2 Death Touch, Mill 2, just excellent.
I didn't play enough Dagger Fang Duos. I think I didn't pick this card quite highly enough because every time my opponents played it, I was like, oh, it's so annoying. Like, you just know it's going to trade with something you care about at some point in the game.
This was like what I thought, like what I kept trying to think about with like Dire Sight and Psychic Whirl early in the format of like, well, it's like that's like half your threshold count. It's like, no,
Dagger Fang Duo as a card is
half your threshold. Yeah.
Yes. Dagger Fang Duo was great in blue-black. Number 4, Light Shell Duo.
Like, where did it come from? Like,
just so good.
Skyrocketed.
After like week 1 or week 1.5, I just fell in love with this card.
Yeah. I think it wasn't until we were messing around with Sealed and I had that deck with like 4 Longstock Brawls, 3 Light Shell Duos that I was like, well, this card is large. It's just like, this does a lot.
And the Surveil too was just huge. You just knew after you played Light Shell Duo that you were going to get like at least 2 good turns of magic after that, probably.
Yeah, you're either it's like I'm hitting my land drop to play my 5-drop, or I'm getting rid of excess lands, and that's pretty sick attached to that body. Number 5, Glide Dive Duo. Love this guy.
Number 6, Life Creed Duo.
Yeah, a little lifelinker. Number 7, now we get into sort of no man's land territory, I feel like.
These are just hoping to never play, probably.
Sky Skipper Duo. Okay, so Sky Skipper Duo 7, Roughshod Duo 8, Kindle Spark Duo 9. And when I was reading this list, I was like, what is Bravekin Duo?
It's the little 1/1 rabbit that can give things +1/+1.
The rabbit mouse. That, I don't think I ever put that. Maybe I put that in a deck once. That was not a card I was interested in.
But like, if we were, let's take the new potential new Lords of Limited grading scale for a run here. Like Baker's Bane Duo and Tree Guard Duo are 4s.
Or Dagger Fang, 4+ maybe.
4+ maybe. I kind of like the plus.
Yeah,
plus addendum.
Yeah, okay.
Dagger Fang Duo, I would say a 4.
Uh-huh.
Light Shell Duo a 4. Mm-hmm. Glide Dive Duo probably a 1.
I think Glide Dive Duo is a 4 also,
You think it's
personally.
a 4?
Yeah.
Ooh, 4 minus? Can we get minuses in there?
We're not getting into the weeds with minuses. I think Glide Dive Duo goes in every black deck, personally. But then there's such a huge, startling cliff. Like Life Creed Duo is a 1.
Is a 1. And then Sky Skipper on down is just zeros.
Just zeros. And zeros either meaning that they're truly unplayable in my mind for Bravekin Duo,
or just like, are irrelevant to your archetype functioning.
Correct.
Like fine to play, but just have next to no impact on the games.
The numbers are working for me. They're still working for me, I gotta say.
Number 23, Crumb and Get It was Crumbelievable.
This is perhaps your magnum opus of takes here. Crumbelievable? Did this just come to you in a fever vision?
No, LSV said it in a video. I stole it.
Oh my god! All right, we'll be sending him a check in the mail, I suppose.
It was just impossible to play around this card. Like you could peg your opponents for Crumb and Get It, and it was crumbing and getting you.
Yeah, it really was. And it was just about when. So funny, I was just doing a draft this week and pegged my opponent for Shore Up, and I felt a similar, like it's obviously Shore Up is not as good as Crumb and Get It, but I felt a similar thing where I was like, oh, I know you have this. What am I supposed to do about that? Like, I don't know.
I had a similar feeling when I was playing Dominaria last night. My opponent hit 8 mana and had a pause that they hadn't had. And I was like, oh, you have Slim Shady. You have Slim Voda. Like, what am I supposed to do about this? Because we're in the world's biggest stalemate. And sure enough, they waited till their 10th land drop and bounced everything, including my turtle that I had the hexproof turtle with the lifelink aura, the flying lifelink aura, Sarah's whatever.
Yeah.
Just all for naught.
Sounds like you love that format. I don't know what to tell you. Number 24, the official Lords of Limited top common of each color. In white, perhaps the biggest upset of the whole episode, Intrepid Rabbit.
Well, I made the list. It's got to be Intrepid Rabbit over Carrot Cake.
I co-sign Intrepid Rabbit over Carrot Cake. Haters be darned.
In blue, Lightshell Duo.
In black, Savor.
In red, Take Out the Trash.
And in green, Baker's Bane Duo. Not much upsets in the other colors, I would say.
I think green, you could maybe make an argument for Cash Grab, I think.
Yeah, I would never personally, but you could make an argument for it. Pack one, pick one. I'm always taking the Baker's Bane.
Number 25, Thoughtstalker Warlock was the LeBron James of Bloomburrow. This card was hyped up during preview season as broken, and it delivered. All format long. Just never let you down.
It's true. The card's great. Are we going to start? Is this going to become... We're going to make sports analogies now on this podcast. Do I need to strap in? Do I need to do some research?
I'll just bring Charlie in as a guest.
Number 26, adding the -1/-1 clause to Downwind Ambusher pushed it from niche playable to one of the better uncommons in the set. I think a nice, a takeaway for us of just like checking out those small tweaks on format staples, on limited staples can have big power level changes.
Yes, I think card was great.
Mm-hmm.
Number 27, the villages are a trap.
It's a trap. Don't put these in your deck. Like everyone wants to find the little narrow 10%. Oh, but if all that happens, then maybe I will activate this once in 10 games.
And it's not probably going to affect the outcome of the game. And then, like, if you hit the other side of the coin, you just lose the game as a result.
As I learned very early on with, why aren't you activating your Lily Splash mentor? It's like, I can't because this isn't actually an island.
That's the difference. It's small margins on either side, but the upside is minor advantage and the downside is game losing.
Yes.
You're just better off never playing them, trying to find the 10% of the time it's right to play them for a 1% advantage in the game.
Yeah. If you're out there being like, no, but like, fine, we don't need to hear about why we're wrong about the villages. Like, just you can play the villages and that's fine. And we are recognizing that there is a time that exists that is right to play them. And if you're a good enough Magic player, you'll figure that out. But for folks at large who just want the quick advice, don't play the villages. Number 28, a bold statement here. Flametongue Kavus are good.
Wix Patrol, excellent. Hivespine Wolverine also so good, and just a house in sealed.
Definitely a house and sealed. Being able to blow up talents is really important. Like just artifact and enchantment hate main deck, like Paw Patch Formation, the Nettle Sentinel, whatever, Nettle Guard, the 3/1 in white. All that is great. I was not crazy about Hivespine Wolverine. I don't know. It wasn't a Flame Tongue Kavu for me.
In sealed, it was.
In sealed, for
like
sure.
that was. I would say with the brain of sealed, like two cards I wanted to open most in my sealed pools: Hunter's Talent, Hivespine Wolverine.
That's fair. That's a fair thing. But yeah, Wix Patrol was excellent. I'm surprised. Well, you didn't put your Daring Wave Rider.
It's coming up in another. It's coming up in another
take
down the road.
Okay.
Number 29. Card advantage engines won games in this format.
I mean, and you didn't need to trigger them very much. Like, I'm looking at these cards and like your opponent triggers Harvest Right Host once. Like they play Harvest Right Host into Intrepid Rabbit, draw a card. That doesn't feel like a game you're winning.
Well, that's because like when a lot of these are popping off, things are going great, right? That's why they didn't need to trigger much, because the sign of them popping off was that your opponent was doing great things.
Well, and a lot of these are so board affecting too. Like Star Charter is next, the 3/1 flyer in white that if you gained or lost life. So that means your deck is already doing the thing, and you have this 3/1 flyer, and you're drawing more threats.
Yes. A Shoreline Looter is either sculpting your hand, or when you hit threshold, just like has to be killed. Shoreline Looter demanded an answer.
And wearing counters from Builder's Talent.
Yes, for sure. Bone Cash Overseer, like just huge card advantage engine for black green, while also getting them on board early, also setting up cash grabs. That was probably Bone Cash Overseer is probably the best one on this list. Well, except for the next one.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I would dicker and deal about other cards, but Hunter's Talent, we cannot sing that card's praises enough, and probably can also sing we can deride it a little bit for even existing in the format. But Hunter's Talent, excellent. Fireglass Mentor we mentioned, but like a lot of these cards, like you didn't need to trigger it more than once for it to feel like, game scales of the game are tipping out of my control. Number 30, trying to grow your creatures to the natural size of Green's creatures was a losing battle. Looking at you, red, white, and blue, red. And I do think Patchwork Banner was a real you needed that card in non-green decks, I think, to be able to compete.
Yeah, I like that take from you. Number 31, True Mana Sinks were back with a vengeance. Lily Splash Mentor, excellent. Another card that just demanded an answer, or it was going to win the game if it stuck on the battlefield because of how good of a mana sink it was. And Heirloom Epic, honestly, the 1-mana artifact 4-tap draw card. You're smirking over there.
I am smirking. I'm not sold on this, but I will let you finish.
Amazing and sealed. And this goes back to the card advantage engines. When you were paying 1 for this or 2 for this, if you had tokens lying around in green white, this was a card draw spell that was good in good green decks or good white decks that went wide in colors that didn't have a lot of other ways to draw cards.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing you don't have on this list that I guess we've already talked about, but the talents.
The talents also
were great mana sinks as well. Like just being able to have a couple spots to dump the mana into to get those up to level 3 paid dividends for you.
Yes.
Number 32, build it and they will come. Builder's Talent, one of the few build arounds in the format worth going after. I'm surprised you just wrote this for me because you don't believe this to be true, do you?
I don't know. I feel like I can't weigh in here because when I did those Builder's Talent things, they were weird drafts in where we had that conversation about Builder's Talent, and I saw a Builder's Talent second pick or third pick and picked it probably when I was not supposed to pick it, and was like, great. We talked about this. I'm doing the thing, and then made lots of suboptimal picks afterwards, planning to draft a Builder's Talent deck, and then never saw other Builder's Talents also in all of those drafts. Got one early that hooked me and made poor choices after it, and also never got rewarded with multiple Builder's Talents. after building towards it. So I feel like I had a bad go of it and already was predisposed to be negative about the format. So
Yeah.
I'm going to abstain from weighing in on Builder's Talent.
That's fair. Well, we did a whole episode devoted to it, so you can check that out if you're interested. But Builder's Talent's super sweet, and you can really get there. But I will say I agree. Like, you do need two. You need two to really feel like you're going to see one at least consistently in your games.
Number 33, the Golden Egg Award for Bloomburrow goes to Fountain Port Bell.
A bit of a, not an upset, but like, from a card that I was like, this card stinks. It's a D. Like, I don't want to put this in my deck too. I totally agree. And then like, it's not doing the thing that Cash Grab or Carrot Cake are doing necessarily, but it's a close approximation. It's colorless. It's a third of a forage. It's a seventh of your threshold. It triggers your prowess stuff as a land. Like, all that adds up to everything you're looking for in a golden egg. Little gluey piece. You're never first picking it, but slots in every deck.
Yeah, this might be the most I've ever come up on a Golden Egg Award winner, or like started out the lowest on or something. Like, I just had some horrible experiences with it early, and I think a very small minority of horrible experiences with it.
Number 34, the Imperial Oath Award for clunky looking overperformer goes to, gotta be Lightshell Duo.
You love to see it.
Yeah.
I love that card so much.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely like lumped it in with other things, but this is true. Like, cream of the crop, cut above the rest. This card's great.
Number 35, my list of oppressive rares that will not be missed. Top of the heap, Season of Loss. That ended some Arena Open runs for me 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Hoping to not run into that again. Maha, Its Feathers Knight. Beat that in some Arena Open runs the other weekend. Fecund Greenshell, the 4/6, just to draw you a billion cards. Speaking of card advantage engines winning games, also had reach, also just inevitably gave your team +2/+2 when it was already bigger than every other color's team.
Bonkers, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Innkeeper's Talent, somehow not the best card in the format. And then another one that just I always lost to, Valley Quest Caller, the white Quest Caller that pumped your team. Like, that on 2 and going wide was really hard to beat.
It's like, well, because it's everything we're talking about with the like what Carrot
creature sizing, the filtering, it does it all.
It does it all for 2 mana. It's like sculpting your hand and pumping your team and getting them. Like, it solves the problem of like, oh, my white creatures are maybe a little smaller than greens. Like, nope, not anymore. Yeah, card's so good. Number 36, pour one out for Eddie Merc Crab and Daring Wave Rider.
Yeah, I think this format was out of balance, as evidenced by these cards falling flat. They were unfortunate casualties of Bloomburrow pushing green quite a bit and blue not quite coming together as much as you would have liked. Number 37, Frilled Spark Shooter has reach.
Yeah, I played enough on MTGO to have gotten got.
Have you really?
By this card. Yeah, why does this have like it's a lizard that gets bigger when you with the on hit stuff. Okay, fine. It has menace. That checks out. So why does it have a blocking mechanic on it? That doesn't make any sense to me. Number 38, Patchwork Banner was a flexible early pick that rewarded you for finding the open lane. And like, I mean, you have often talked about why you don't like this card. Is like, it just says like, oh, did you find, is your deck good? Then your deck's better because you have Patchwork Banner, which isn't great attached to a colorless card. But I think this was like an early little, like something I didn't peg early in the format that I then realized I was like, oh, you can just take this early. Like, I felt like I wanted to be like, well, once I know I'm blue-green frogs, then I can take it. It's like, no, you can just take it. And then whatever of those 10 decks you get into, then this will be good.
Yes. Number 39, Sealed was a card advantage war. I'm signing up for more today, baby.
Get those mind spirals and psychic whirls and bandits talents in.
That's right.
Number 40, if you're in the market for clunky overpriced removal, Bumbleflower Sharepot is better than Early Winter.
I remember the moment that I realized this. I was like deck building and had an Early Winter in there and was looking at if I wanted to make any swaps, and I saw Bumbleflower Sharepot and I was like, huh, wonder if you're better than early winter. And then I like went through the deck and I was like, well, you work with this. So you work with this. So you work with that. All right, get out of here, early winter. I don't care about instant speed. I want 2 permanents hitting the battlefield.
Exactly. Yeah. I want something I can pick up with Sticky Tongue Sentinel.
Number 41, Keen-Eyed Curator randomly hosing Threshold and Forage was oppressive. Well, also just turning into a 7/7. That part is also quite oppressive.
Right. And like I found like that card I thought was like cool. It's like green, that's a bit of a cost. And like then you kind of wanted to build you're like, oh, I want to throw a Fountain Port Bell in here. Or maybe I can find an enchantment that's gonna make its way to the graveyard, whatever. And then you played it against a blue-black deck, and you're just like, oh, this just hates on your whole deck's game plan. And like, it doesn't really hate on Forage as much, but definitely hates on it a little bit, like black-green's trying to get stuff back from their graveyard, and just getting to nab that is really, really rough. Number 42, Paw Patch Formation is the poor man's cash grab. It's actually just a good card too, but I feel like what I want from cash grab is card plus food token. Paw Patch Formation gives it to you. It doesn't give you any selection on that card. It doesn't give you 4 cards in your graveyard for forage, but it gives you card plus food.
Well, and especially going back to Sealed, if you don't open one of the Wolverines, you better believe you're playing Paw Patch Formation. Paw Patch Formation is just a good card in Sealed.
Well, yeah, because of being able to target opposing flyers and opposing talents. And I felt like the pinch I always had in green decks in Sealed was not enough food. Like things that wanted forage, wanted food tokens, and not enough ways to make food.
Yes, like when you're trying to make green work, because you need to make green work, but you didn't really open a premium green pool. Number 43, green getting 3 excellent removal spells helped leverage the size of its creatures. Like it was just bigger than everything else, and then it also had these 3 awesome removal spells to reward it for its stuff being bigger than everything else.
Hunter's Talent, we've talked about. Longstalk Brawl, we've talked about a little bit. That card was a huge overperformer as well, I think, for me. And Polywallop was an overperformer in that, like, I recognized, oh, I'm going to play this in Frogs decks. And then I realized I'm just playing this in most green decks. Like, it doesn't, like, I'm not thrilled to pay 4 for it, but I will if I have to.
Right. It ranged from insane to playable.
Yeah.
Which is a good Magic card.
And shout out to you, number 44. As a result, Into the Floodmaw was a great tempo positive way to interact with green decks for just a low cost of a blue mana. Like, I thought I wanted to do this with Runaway together, but that was 2 mana and tempo negative to you. Like, sure, if you had a Pawn Prophet to pick up, you were happy. But Into the Floodmaw as just like I can just hold this up the rest of the game and get under a fight spell or a bite spell was really nice.
Yes. Number 45, Ygra, Eater of All, turns your disenchant effects into Doomblade because it makes everything food.
Now we're talking with Hivespine Wolverine. Now we're talking. Just nom 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 nom. So good.
Card was aptly named. You were chumping quite often into Ygra.
Yeah, ridiculous. Number 46, Tangle Tumbler was a fun card to make work. This is the 3 mana artifact. It was a 6/6 vehicle. You could crew it by tapping 2 tokens and pay 3 tap to put a counter on something. I just wish its best home wasn't in one of the best decks. Like that was what, like, I wish that this was somehow like cared about otters or something, cared about birds, so that then you could be like, oh, this is like a way into those lesser archetypes. But like, you're like, oh, this is a really cool way to make green-white a better deck. Like when my green-white deck is singing, this like, pushes it over the top.
It's like a patchwork banner for only green-white.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Number 47, Blacksmith's Talent plus Starforged Sword was a powerful combo.
Yeah, I loved this. +3/+3 double strike. I mean, you don't need it. The Blacksmith's Talent does it kind of on its own. But it once I had a Blacksmith's Talent, if I was doing that, I'd pick up a Starforged Sword for my deck.
I think so.
Number 48, Scales of Shale was best in a Lizards deck, but really strong anywhere. This was, again, a late stage format realization for me, thanks to you, of just like +2/+0 lifelink indestructible for 3 mana is a good card, and it's
a reasonable rate.
It's going to swing the outcome of games. It's certainly going to swing the tempo of games. You open yourself up to 2-for-1 possibilities, but if you're smart about when you land it, you're really gonna get that extra bit of juice, and it's a strong card.
Yes, and you're never playing multiple copies outside of a Lizard's deck.
Correct.
But as a one of, like I think a good draft or good player can set it up to be a high leverage card.
Well, and there's even a little bit of, like, I think your opponent, when you're playing red-black, your opponent is definitely thinking at the front of their mind, Scales of Shale is one of the things I gotta be, trying to play around as best you can, whatever. In any other black deck, I'm not thinking you have Scales of Shale.
Right.
I'm not surprised when you cast
factor.
It,
right.
But I'm definitely not putting that in my wheelhouse.
Number 49, Heartfire Hero into Manifold Mouse was one of the most oppressive starts to a game in the format.
1 mana, 1/1 Valiant into Manifold Mouse, target Heartfire Hero, give it double strike. You're attacking with a 2/2 double strike on turn 2. I've faced this multiple times.
Have you? I've never faced this.
It is brutal. It's brutal. You're just like, how am I supposed to beat this? Like, sure, if you have a saver, great, congratulations. You have to time it on 2, but otherwise that thing is getting out of control. And number 50, Bloomburrow is a great introductory set, but it doesn't have much legs beyond that. I will not, I think, I'm already sort of famous for saying I'm not a huge fan of flashing back formats. I definitely will feel fine if I never do another Bloomburrow draft. And I thought this format was fine.
This format was fine minus for me. This was, I think, below average overall. I will be arena opening this weekend, and then I think I'll be done. I will be vintage cubing. I've been doing vintage cubing some more. Like I said, I've gotten on the LSV video kick. And I have enjoyed playing and competing as well.
Can I try and dispel, my call to action our listeners and viewers on YouTube? Ben was playing Vintage Cube, doing the feeder leagues last week, and I was like, why aren't you streaming? And he was like, no one wants to watch me play Vintage Cube. And I sent him a raised hand emoji. And so he privately streamed his drafts just to me on Discord because he thinks people don't want to watch him play Vintage Cube on Magic Online, on stream, or on YouTube. And so I need people to tell him that there are dozens of us who want to watch him, to encourage him to stream. So that's the call to action, folks. Please follow suit.
I will probably keep my vintage cubing to myself, but we'll see. If I could maybe be bullied into it, but I think the jury is in based on the YouTube results on your vintage cube videos as well.
I will never be doing vintage cube, I think, on YouTube again because the views are so bad. But on stream, you can't stop me. You can't stop me.
It's not that I don't want to stream them. I was just like, with school, like, I just wanted to be introverted. I just wanted to play Magic.
I hear you. Sometimes you don't want to talk through why you're trying to pick Luris, jam Luris into your deck. You
just don't want to explain to your son how good it is. You just want to take the card guilt-free.
Exactly. Yeah. So I get it.
All right. On that note, thank you as always to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website at lordsoflimited.com. You can find all of our content on our website at lordsoflimited.com. Links to our YouTube channel, our respective Twitch streams, our tier lists. We'll have one out for Duskmorn in a few weeks once the full set drops. You can find our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, as I have my Mad shirt on and I'm sipping from my Lords of Limited mug. You can find our Patreon page as well and our episode backlog, all at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.